So for this session, we've got the general tutorial set up, and then we've got a project idea discussion on our agenda. So we will start with our tutorial, which this session will be presented by Dr. Brianna Shepard, the Associate Director of Research with the WVU Office of Health Affairs. She will be giving us a tutorial on designing posters for research projects. So Bri, I'll go ahead and hand things over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Jen. Happy Friday, everybody. It's nice to see you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, can you see slides? All right, and then can you see slideshow? All right, perfect. So, today is going to be kind of a broad, I don't even want to say best practices, but things to consider when designing posters for research projects. Research projects might be a little bit constrictive. We'll talk about that as well. But why a poster, right? When I was thinking about putting this together, sometimes we tend to jump directly into like, what's going into it, right? And how it should be set up and laid out and color schemes and what have you. But I think it's important to start with what is the purpose of the poster and what is the information that it's supposed to convey in a specific type of medium. And so I found a few resources that I liked a lot. And it really is a visual representation of the data that you want to highlight out of a specific research project. And it really is designed to be very concise, descriptive, and identify what you and or the study team felt is most relevant. It should have some explanatory components associated with it, of course, right? And it should contain enough information that if it stands alone and you're not there to also explain things that are on the poster, that somebody could come up, take a look at it, read through it, and still have a good understanding of the purpose of your study, the methodology of how you approached the research question or community-based project that you had, what you identified as the most relevant findings, and then a little bit about, what are the implications of that, including any limitations. But even before that, what about poster formatting? And I think the best advice that I can give you is to be sure to read the requirements for whatever venue it is that you are planning to present at. Pretty much every conference or summit has recommendations or guidelines for what it is that they're looking for posters so that it's roughly standardized across all of the posters that are happening. Over the last couple of years where everything is moved to virtual, it was a little crazy and hectic in the beginning of what a virtual poster looks like, but even since then, there's been a lot of creativity that's happened with that. We think of, kind of the large traditional scientific posters where they're printed on either fabric or very, very large printer paper. The kind of the standard size is listed there. And other venues, the State Rural Health Conference, for example, when it's held in person, they have to be standalone. And so a trifold poster is another option for that. And then we'll touch a little bit on different types of virtual presentations. But again, as you are thinking about not only what's going to go in your poster, you want to think about and make sure that you read the guidelines for how it's going to be physically presented at the venue or virtually. So the main components of a poster: a title. You want to include your names and affiliations. There's some folks say abstract, some folks say overview. A little bit of that is personal preference, and a little bit of that is dependent upon what the conference or venue itself requires. But within that initial section, whether it's an abstract or overview or introduction, background information, you want to make sure that the purpose is very clearly stated of why you were completing the project that you did. And then if it's exploratory, you want to state that it's exploratory. If you have very specific research questions, you want to make sure that those are introduced early and highlighted in some way. I myself like bold font, but folks are very creative in how they do that. The other sections typically include your methods, results, conclusions, references, acknowledgements. So some of the very similar components to a manuscript, but again, it's very visually focused, concise, and not necessarily encompassing every result that you got, but just what you want to highlight for that specific presentation. So what makes a poster a good poster, if you will? The title typically pretty short. Sometimes manuscript titles can get really long. For a poster, you want it to be short, but it still needs to convey the main message that you want your audience to take away. Not a lot of words. So really leverage that visual aspect that you can have in a poster presentation versus a more traditional manuscript as a way to disseminate information. There are, guidelines in different universities and what have yous that recommend anywhere from 300 to 800 words max. The average really is like right around 500, but just trying to be effective in how you present your information. And the fewer words you can use, the better on a poster, as long as you're still providing enough that it's standalone. Some things that you can do within a poster to reduce the number of words that you're using, but still convey information. Use bullet points instead of full sentences to relay some types of information. You can use numbering, icons, or infographics that really stress kind of the point that you're hoping to make. Effective use of graphics, colors, and fonts. Using a consistent color scheme will make a poster more visually appealing and draw more people to it. So that's another component that makes a poster a good poster. All your visuals include captions or some type of explanation. So again, if you had someone who came up and you didn't happen to be at your poster at the time, they could take a look at your figure and read the captions and be able to understand the main point that you're trying to make with the data that you chose to display on your poster. Providing section headers within your poster and including white space is also very important. So kind of like if you're doing a grant proposal, the goal is to have white space there, right? So that it makes it easier physically to read. So I did some searching on examples of good posters. And of course, this one has manatee, right? How often do you get to put pictures of a manatee in part of a presentation that you're giving? And so in this case, they chose to use a light blue background. They used numbering. They had section headers. They have graphs and visuals, but they're pretty easy to read. Their discussion is bullet pointed, and they've bolded the main points that they want you to take away from that. And so, overall, it meets the kind of standard criteria for what is a good. Thanks, Jay. Here's an example of another good poster from some folks that you might recognize. So again, there are very clear section headers. In this case, instead of methods, it's an evaluation design, but again, it's very appropriate for the project description itself. They use infographics successfully. If you can notice in the middle towards the bottom, they use the quotes, and that's indicating, drawing your attention to some of the qualitative data that came out of this project, which is a really good use of those visual icons to help guide individuals through the sections. And then it literally says main takeaways, which I love as a section header, right? So if you were to come up to this poster and take a look, it would be very clear of what the authors wanted you to take away from reviewing their information. So what are some other examples of visuals? Like using the icons that was on the last poster, I think was a very good example. You can also present your data with different types of visuals. Credit to Dr. Jen Irvin, who did this fictional example, but there were she uses this to indicate what the study population, the design, and the outcome for the study were just in one section of the poster. So an entire method section could even be visualized in this way, and it grabs your attention, right? And you could understand from this information the main points of each of those specific components of the poster. So having looked at some examples of good posters and then some additional examples of how you can be creative with showing visualizations of data or study designs or study populations, what makes a poster not so good? Too much text. It's really hard to read. Too many tables or figures, or the tables or figures are too small. That's also another challenge, not enough white space. Misalignments, misspelling, grammatical errors, not having section headers to help orient attendees to each of the different sections or each of the different components of your study, and helping them understand what the main takeaways are, and then using inconsistent colors or color schemes. So this is an example of a not so good poster. Mr. Purrington has a whole website dedicated to what's a good poster and what's a not so good poster. And so he created the specific one to demonstrate like what is not a good poster. So, I mean, it's very cute and catchy at first, right? If you look at it, but the background is really busy and the wording is kind of small and hard to read. There's not really many visuals. And so it'd be really kind of hard to understand what the main points or what the data were that were included with this. And so just a few examples of things that make it challenging for individuals to go through the data on the poster. Another example that the Purdue Online Writing Lab has included, again, it's mostly words, not super descriptive. There's a lot of misalignments. The information is probably good, but it's a little bit hard to follow, even though they do have section headers. And it's not 100% clear, based on their results section, how they got there, right? What do they what is their actual data in order to inform the conclusions that they have? And so Jen Boyd brought this up to me, and I'd heard about it, but I've never seen it. But there is a kind of a new approach for creating posters. And I've included the link to the story that Jen shared at the bottom. They entitled it How to Save the Science Poster, because sometimes they do get too busy, right? We want to share every exciting thing that we found, and so we end up kind of overcrowding information. And so in this case, what they look at is just very brief bulleted purpose, bulleted methods, very brief results. Most of the poster in the middle in this example is literally their main finding. They have some backup information to show you like the actual data to support that conclusion on the right side. And then they use QR codes as a way for folks to use their phone to link to a more detailed explanation of their project. So one more thing that I do want to touch on in terms of creating posters is to be thinking about accessibility as you are creating and designing your poster. So again, the goal is to provide that information concisely, and you can do that in multiple ways that will make it more accessible to different individuals that might be looking at the information that you're sharing. You may choose to use a gray background or a light blue background as opposed to white. Being aware of individuals who have color vision deficiency, you may be very purposeful in the color schemes that you choose when you're creating your graphics, visuals, tables, what have you. You could choose to include a QR code that provides a link to a more accessible version. Maybe it has a voiceover associated with it so that individuals who might have visual accessibility challenges can still, get the information. And even when you're doing your oral presentation part of it, being considerate of that, being able to, not just point to a graph or a figure and indicate that these were our results, but getting comfortable with your data and being able to explain it to someone that they could still be able to understand what it is you're trying to convey, even if they might not necessarily be able to see the graph itself or the table itself, and using both those visual and verbal modalities for that. And at the bottom is a link to a website that has lots of other excellent suggestions on how you can increase accessibility to conference. So virtual presentations, I think we have all done some of them at some point. I was going to provide an example slideshow, but I think I'm going to end up going over a little bit of time. But I have provided one to Jen that she will send out with this presentation, and also the meeting minutes of how you might set up a poster as a slide format, which has been requested by a lot of different conferences over the years. So instead of having a single PowerPoint slide where all of the information is presented, you just do it as a PowerPoint presentation, still focusing on the sections that are part of a typical poster if you were doing it in a more traditional printed format. And then I also provided the link on how to record voiceovers in PowerPoint for presentations. So that way, if you were asked to do that, or you choose to do more of that QR code, you provide that option to folks who have that information. I also wanted to include some references and resources, links to different examples, different templates. There are lots of great ones here. They've got lots of great tips. You can get really creative with it and how you present your information that you're excited about. And then I wanted to talk just a little bit about poster printing as well, right? So here are just a few examples of places that will print traditional size posters, posters of vertical orientation, horizontal orientation. You can have them printed on fabric, which is a lot easier to take with you if you're traveling on a conference. So just some resources for folks there on kind of that poster printing process. And I was gonna go through of what do we like and what can be improved as an example, but I'm over my time, so I'm going to stop now and take questions. But I would encourage folks, like if you go back and take a look at this, or you're interested in doing so, here's an example that you can work through and think about how you might want to structure or improve your own construction forward. That being said, are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Dr. Shepherd. Yes, if anyone has any questions or feedback, or we can feel free to pull up that poster as well to kind of critique that as a group if we would like. Now is the time.
I just have a comment. Thank you, Bree. I thought it was very good. One experience that I've had is if you can work with a visual artist will make your content look like you're a genius. And you may not be the genius, but they'll make you look like a genius. Plus, they tend to be objective and ask you questions about, well, what does this mean or what does that mean, and makes it more intelligible to a broader audience. Those are just two little tidbits that I've picked up over the years that I thought I would share, but your presentation was excellent.
Thanks, Bree. That was great. I really appreciate the QR code. I think it's been so long since I've been in in-person poster presentation that I'm behind the curve and haven't seen that. But the idea of accessibility, I think that's so important. And of course, always highlighting the main takeaways. I feel like at poster presentations, so much of the material, I don't have any clue what they're talking about. And that's the first thing I ask. So I think that's super. Thank you for that.
Okay, excellent. Well, if there are any other further questions, we still have a couple of minutes for Dr. Shepherd to answer those or field those. But if any come up later on, maybe when you go back and kind of review her slides or the materials that we send out as a follow-up, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll help connect you to continue that discussion.
Bree, I will be sending this to all of our residents about their posters that are upcoming. So thank you for being concise and not having me ramble through it with them. So this will help them a lot.
Excellent. Yes. And I thought that the examples that you provided of kind of the ideal poster versus those that maybe were a bit cluttered or too much information would be really helpful to us as well. It's a nice touch.
Yeah, and I want to take a minute to thank Jen Boyd, who helped me look through this and think through this. And I really want to pilot test that new format and kind of get feedback from folks on what they think about it. It's a really interesting concept. And I think, at least for me as a researcher, I get so excited about the findings and the results and the data that I really do just want to cram it all on there sometimes. And I have to remind myself, like, that is not the purpose of a poster. And so I think it's a really good way to be like, here's the one thing that I want to highlight from this poster. And then it makes you, because you're using that visual section for that, it makes you really, really think about what else you're going to include on either side so that it makes sense why you drew that conclusion. So I'm going to try it. It might be an epic fail, but I appreciated the idea and we'll see how it goes.
I doubt that. But I first heard that guy talk about that poster design before the pandemic and I was hearing it as not as a poster presenter, but as a participant in a poster session. And I was thinking about what it's like to walk around a huge hall with lots of posters and you're trying to, first of all, identify which, researchers you want to talk to, which research you want to look more into. And then, and I think design has a lot to do with it. And when you can really identify quickly what the main points are. And then the other thing about it is I think it really leads well to conversation because you're not just standing there trying to read every detail and get the small print. So I just thought it was cool. Anyway. I'm glad you included it. Thanks for the presentation, Bria. It was great.
Out of curiosity, do we have access through the CTSI to any visual artist? To follow up on Mary's comment.
That's a great question.
Sorry, Stacy.
Go for it. 'Cause I don't have an answer.
I was just gonna just kind of ask you to, Bill, what do you mean by visual artists? Like what kinds of things are you looking for?
Well, I was just, as Mary was saying, have somebody go through, improve our graphics, improve our data. Is that one of the services? Do we have somebody give that kind of expertise or that kind of feedback? I didn't know if we work with graphic designers or anything like that, or what we've got. My initial thought is my brother's a graphic designer. I'm now going to have him look at my posters before they go out, but I didn't know if for the group there's a better way.
So for data visualizations and things like that, we do have some people that do different types of things, and Sherry's definitely one of them. She's really good at many of those things. But as far as the poster, to look at the poster's overall presentation, I know Jay's done quite a few posters and stuff. I'm not sure. Did you work with like E and J or what did you guys do?
Yeah, I mean, I always have somebody else look at it that has not looked at it before, just not necessarily from an artistic standpoint, but just, to look it over to make sure it's not too busy or something like that. I mean, Ian's done a lot of this stuff. I would say he's, he would be the person within the CTSI, but he's one person. That would be the only issue.
Yeah, and I usually just get informal feedback, or I do lots of searches of what other people do that I like, and then see if it makes sense for the data that I have. Like WVU has university relations that you could probably request that kind of service for, but they would charge you for it. So I'm not aware of an existing resource other than, us who kind of look and think. But I dropped part to take math because I didn't want to take a B. So I am not the design kind of person.
The CR Dev
Canva,
group can definitely help you with like data visualizations and stuff,
Yeah.
Bill. We're happy to do that kind of stuff to make your data look a little prettier and easier to read. So if that's something that anybody needs, just let us know, or Stacy or Jen or someone, they can get you in contact with us.
We use,
Canva is oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mary.
we use a gentleman down in he's moved to Huntington, but we got connected with this gentleman who used to be employed by WVU here in Charleston. And he was a visual artist. And so now if I have something that is going like to a national meeting, I usually contact him and have it do it. I have to pay a little bit of a fee, but man, he can make me look great. So I usually contact him.
Yeah, can I make a comment here? Because based on the statistical point of view, so I do think visualization figure are most important for poster. So this is really very important when you make a presentation poster. Figure always go most important part. So that I'm thinking this is important. So probably the second will be table. So figure is most important, then figure, then statistic. Statistic is the last. I'll put it in the last because it's not necessary. But of course, if you have that, that's okay. That's better. That's a plus. But if you don't have too much like a p-value, it's okay because the big signal is very important. You need to show the big signal poster for the visualization and for the plot. Because for the p-value, that's forever. You can ask more and more. The question is forever. So you don't need it to be perfect, but you need to pass your message as much as you can. So that's why I think a figure can tell you everything. So I totally agree. When you make a presentation or poster, go figure a piece and also table. Then last word, people always ask, what is your statistical p-value? I think this is just too picky. Right? I would say it's very picky because they got to say something, right? But really, it's important for the figure. Then statistically, if you have any people ask the question, you can come to me. That's my last thing. Okay, good. Thank you. Very good.
Yeah,
Very good.
and to Sejan's point, just to reiterate, it's so important to have a caption underneath, whether it's a figure or a table, so that it puts that visualization into context. And so, sometimes in posters, we don't necessarily think about that like we would for a manuscript, but it's a very important component.
I have a question for everybody out there. A couple of things. So I think what you were saying, Bree, about the new model, it's also, can we show our posters on there as opposed to people crowding around? And one of the other things environmentally, we're printing all these posters for a one-shot deal, and then they collect in the corner of our offices. And so I don't know if anybody's ever seen anything where there's a short throw projector or some system like that, that instead of printing them, we're able to display them, or people can download them on their iPad, things like that. I really think working with our an engineering department with kind of lenses and stuff, you should be able to. They make those projectors. The problem is cost, and so we need something fairly inexpensive that can do be used over and over. Because it really is. I mean, at Harper's Ferry, Bill, you probably know how many posters we had. We end up just tossing them after a while. Nobody wants to throw it away, but you just have to.
We're probably 360 since we started the poster session to 400. So, and
Like so I don't know if anybody's seen any
presented twice or
right. Yeah, if anybody's seen anything like that at meetings, or kind of if that's an idea.
Yeah, that the only thing I've seen maybe remotely close to that is they would have just a couple of projectors where they loaded poster, like the PowerPoint poster slides, and just played them. And so like nobody was actually standing to an actual poster while they were there. You would just like kind of look at the larger screens and look at the information, but authors could be available to talk to you about their different posters. It has its advantages and disadvantages to do that, because it goes through a rotation. So if you didn't see everything you wanted to see the first time, you'd have to go back. But the other thing that you bring up that I hadn't really thought about is like recycling, and what do venues do about recycling of those? And it's something I've never noticed or thought about.
Yeah. So the idea I was thinking is you get mounted on the wall, and you, same as you'd put your poster up, you'd have 20, 200, whatever, small projectors. And, it may be expensive initially, but over time, if you look at the total cost of how many posters everybody in the country, in the world prints, it's pretty amazing. So
the cloth ones take up so much less space, but I wonder if they're even less environmentally friendly or not. And that one, I don't know. Those seem nice. I liked our virtual format for the poster session for the PBRN conference, where we kind of had small groups and like did mini presentations and discussion. And that seemed like it was a really effective poster session. I mean, the only problem being you couldn't catch everything. And if it wasn't in the group you got assigned to, you weren't catching everything, but it worked. I thought it worked really well at the last year's PBRN conference. So, and nothing was printed for that.
If somebody could develop ink that was washable, then you could reuse the cloth, right? do a poster. That's a pretty cool idea about the projector. I think somebody's got to be working on that somewhere.